Oh my god, you're from WeAreChange Rotterdam.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Mr. Harris, thank you for taking the time to see us and to talk to us.
Thank you.
I have a few questions prepared.
Okay.
What would you say is your style of journalism?
I guess my style of journalism is campaigning, because for me journalism is something that we have to accept automatically has biases in it, and therefore to recognise the biases means that we have to take control of them as a human responsibility, and we have to say, well, what do we care about? We care about injustice, we care about social injustice, international conflicts, particularly ongoing conflicts like the Israel-Palestine conflict. And therefore we have to try and put our position against these injustices. So I see myself as someone that tries to tell the stories that can help, in my way, to remedy the injustices. So I see myself as campaigning for that.
Okay, then you use the word bias. Do you think it's inevitable to be biased?
Actually, it is inevitable. I mean, for example, myself, to be honest, I was born and raised in Oxford, in England. I mean, only a couple of days ago in Germany, I was joking with my German friends about English stereotypes and etc., and our personality differences and the way we talk differently. And we all do have a fingerprint, a signature, which is our own, which goes to change our worldview, our personality, our ability to communicate with others from other places, from different places around the world, different languages and etc. And this actually plays a big part in how we see the world, our ability to humanize the other. And this particularly is one element I would say, which is we have a bias actually in the West, particularly excuse me, in Britain. When we had the British Empire, we still have a lot of indoctrinated imperialist notions. That these people are backward and that we are supreme because we have iPhone 5 and etc. And because in some cases because we're white and they're just lesser people. And this is actually still prevalent in a very deep notion in our country, unfortunately. And that's something which is slowly being unravelled, thank God. But biases like this are very indoctrinated, and firstly we have to say these are the biases that exist. We want to get rid of them, and we want to replace them with humane biases for justice.
Well, in that sense, you write in your blog, we know that objectivity is a theory, and when objectivity is a theoretical concept, as you write, isn't independence also a theoretical concept?
Actually, yeah, I guess independence can be a theoretical concept. I mean, for me, being an independent journalist, which I am steadfastly, and actually I would probably hate not to be, not least because then you have to work inside a corporate system and etc. But for me, independence is something which can be a binary yes or no, because actually I'm not, for example, myself, when I, for example, went to Gaza recently, I was funded by viewers. So I was viewer supported. So we can say that I am not independent of my viewers, but I am independent of a state, a corporation, or a pressure group. And also I have as a principle that I don't really listen to negative criticism, even if it's from my viewers, even if it's from my funders. Because then it would be unfair, because then one person would have a voice in controlling what I think about my own work, whereas the others wouldn't. So I tend to listen to my viewers as the people that matter, but just generally what the feedback is. I mean, actually, in terms of manipulation, the most obvious form of manipulation is on the internet, with people trying to hijack discussions and things like this. And generally, actually, I don't tolerate hijacking, because it changes the agenda from the agenda I've set with my reports. We're discussing this topic, we're looking at this issue, and people will try and subvert it, and then you end up with 100 comments on something totally different. And generally, I don't actually tolerate this most of the time, because we know, as a matter of fact, that many of Israel's supporters are actually paid to disrupt and to change the agenda. And so therefore this is something which is just unacceptable. We can't accept this.
Earlier on you said that you are biased. How about if people would say, well, you are biased even towards supporting Hamas?
I mean, actually, there's no evidence that I'm biased towards supporting Hamas. The only comments that I ever make about supporting Hamas is to remind people that they were democratically elected by the majority of Palestinians in 2006, which is, of course, an important statement to make. And in the context of what people know about Hamas, the odd, unthinking person definitely will think that I'm pro-Hamas because they don't even know Hamas was elected. So even bringing up the most simple, basic fact, it's just to say, it's just this, isn't it? It's that to say a small word of truth in a sea of untruth sounds revolutionary, and this is the situation we face in this context. I mean, actually, I'm definitely not pro-Hamas. I mean, if I was Palestinian, I wouldn't vote for Hamas. But people have to realise that Hamas still has a widespread popular mandate. Only couple of weeks ago, it had its 25th anniversary with hundreds of thousands of Palestinians coming out to, demonstrate their support of Hamas. And there is an increase in unity between Hamas and other political factions. There's a strengthening of Hamas. And although, obviously, with every form of government, Hamas has failures, including major failures, broadly, people are actually quite happy with Hamas still. I mean, there are haters of Hamas, there are lovers of Hamas, but my feeling is that we don't have polls for this, but my feeling is that the average bulk of people is kind of tepid water. It's okay. Hamas is okay. The problem is not Hamas, the problems we're facing with the economy and etc. The problem is the illegal occupation. So this is what I hear quite a lot of the time.
What if you were able to vote in Gaza or in Palestine? What would you vote? How would you vote?
I mean, actually, this is a really nice question. The problem is that having not lived there long enough, I wouldn't really know who to vote for. These feelings of miscontent are, in a way, I mean, this is actually all to an extent responsible because, again, of the occupation, because it has been a policy of splitting up the different Palestinian political factions to weaken some at the expense of others, to give artificial weight to, for example, the PA. And in Gaza, that really is a talking point, that the PA has an artificial legitimacy, a boost in legitimacy which is artificial, and that Hamas has been delegitimized, although it was democratically elected. So actually this has been a systematic policy. It has been trying to weaken Palestinians' ability just to represent themselves. So in terms of who I'd vote for, I don't know.
So the footage of you being shot at by IDF at the border.
Yeah.
And I really wonder, like, what is it going to take for you to really leave Gaza permanently? If you're not discouraged by that, what would make you leave Gaza?
I mean, the only time that I would actually evacuate the Gaza-strip is if things got really bad in terms of, like, Israel trying to actually destroy the Gaza-strip. I mean, in many ways it has kind of destroyed the Gaza-strip, but I mean, actually wipe it off the map. Otherwise, I would stay, because the point is that someone has to put their life in danger to report it. And actually, I don't really know many other people who would do that. And I feel that I have a personal commitment now, particularly because my friends, I have friends in Gaza and in Israel. So this is something which is personal to me. I have a personal issue with as well now. Someone has to stay here, someone has to set a precedent that internationals are not going to be scared away when Israel starts this kind of operation, because if we set this precedent, then it gives a sort of green light for them to launch these operations more regularly and with more media impunity, the ability for them to get away without people knowing what's happened. And the same actually with Vittorio Arrigoni, an Italian activist who was killed. I said to myself, well, look, this guy has been killed by Palestinians. It's probably the single only incident of an international activist being killed by Palestinians ever. But this has had an impact in making internationals afraid of going to Gaza. I need to go to Gaza to undo this example, so people don't feel afraid of going anymore.
And how about the Dutch government? What do you think their position is on this whole conflict?
Well, I know that it's extremely pro-Israel.
Let's take an out-of-the-box viewpoint and say top leaders of Hamas, etc., but also Mossad and the IDF, etc., both have a huge investment made in maintaining the conflict Wouldn't it be cunning for the top of both sides to organize this together, implying one agenda of terror and fear that is followed?
I guess for me, the answer to this is that, yes, indeed, of course, the Palestinian political representation and the Israeli political representation, most obviously, to an extent, might have a motive in perpetuating the conflict in its current form. I wouldn't personally give much weight to that. I mean, from the Israeli motive, Israel is doing quite well. If you look at it, it hasn't really had any terrorist attacks, which of course any problem largely, I mean any deaths recently. It's quite happily stealing Palestinian land, colonizing Palestinian land. It's got a lot of international diplomatic, military and economic support. The Palestinians basically have none of this. They're constantly terrorized. They are an ongoing victim of occupation and state terrorism. And actually everyone in Gaza suffers from that, even the internationals and myself who've been there. So I don't see a big motive from the Palestinian factions in Gaza to keep it ongoing. I just think they wouldn't be human if they were trying to do that. But of course there is an argument for that. And then many people criticize Hamas, saying that it's trying to embed itself in power as long as possible illegitimately. This is one of the main statements against Hamas. But I've actually forgotten the first part of your question.
Well, it is a bit of a conspiracy theory, isn't it, to say that the top leaders would have the same interest?
I know what I was going to say. Well, actually, there are conspiracies that are not conspiracies. I mean, they're conspiracies in the technical definition, but they're not wishy-washy. And from the Palestinian perspective, Israel has done actually quite a good job at assassinating Palestinian leaders who could have made peace with Israel. For example, this recent operation, Operation Pillar of Cloud, started on the 14th of November, and I was there. They started the operation by assassinating 52-year-old Ahmed al-Jabari, who is one of the senior leaders in Hamas's militant wing, and he was actually, we can kind of say, a peace broker, because he was responsible for the discussion of prisoner exchange deals, as well as short and long-term ceasefire deals between Israel and the Palestinians. So, from the Palestinian perspective, they are used to actually the most humble and open of their leadership actually being killed in Israel's operations. And you have to then ask yourself, well, why is Israel killing the people that it's been negotiating with and not the ones it hasn't been negotiating with to such an extent? And as I say, from the Palestinian perspective, it's because obviously Israel doesn't want peace. And I just explained, Israel is occupying someone else's country. It's increasingly colonizing and displacing, colonizing someone else's country, their land, displacing the indigenous population, the Palestinians. And so actually, on the current trajectory, on the current status quo, Palestinians will lose, and Israel will win. They'll get all of the land. So this is why I say to people that this is an emergency situation. We have to do something about this now, because it's not in a holding position. It's in an escalating, ever grave state. So I see something to this, but not a lot, I guess.
Okay. How about the genuine peacemakers, people that are true pacifists? All over the world we see them killed, like John Lennon or Mahatma Gandhi, John F. Kennedy. Yeah. Are those people also in Israel or in Palestine? Do they exist on both sides? And, could you give us some examples?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with Israel on the most, because obviously it's the most important. I mean, within every system of oppression, there are always dissenters, even if it's a minority of one person. And to, I think, be a dissenter inside the Israeli society has to be one of the most courageous things one could do as a human being, because as an Israeli, because this is such an oppressive and indoctrinated society, externally oppressive as well as internally oppressive to an extent, and so indoctrinated that it requires a lot of courage to do this. And I'm honoured actually to have Israeli friends who are of this category of people who dedicate their whole lives to trying to resolve the conflict from an Israeli point of view. Most people in Gaza, this is very important to understand, most people in Gaza are living in a third world entity. They are refugees. Most of them are children. Most of them don't have enough food to survive, so they're relying on aid to survive. Most of them are living in dire poverty, without internet connections and without an ability to really know what's going on in Israel in terms of the internal politics in Israel. So what does this mean? This means that for most Palestinians, their form of resisting the Israeli machine is simply just trying to have a basic, normal life with as much stability as they can get their hands on. Bringing up their family, educating it as best they can, getting married, having babies, and etc. In a way, this is the most potent form of resistance in Gaza. Because this is, if you like, a demographic fight, that we're not going to give up our land. We're going to try and build a society here. You know, you can bomb us, but we're still going to have this resilience in our societal structure and in our family structure. So this is a primary form of resistance, overwhelmingly. Then, of course, there is armed resistance, which is constitutes less than 1% of the population. 1% of the population have never even, most of the population, 99% of the population, have never even touched a gun in their lives. And then there is the non-violent protest movement inside Gaza, which is again a small, relatively small thing, because as we know, being in the West campaigners, that actually it's a privilege to be able to have the time and the funds to be activists, to go to demonstrations and etc. Because some people have to work 24 hours a day to survive and to look after their family.
So would you say, is Islam either a part of the solution or more part of the problem?
Oh, well, I like this question. This is awesome. Well, actually, all of the three Abrahamic faiths call for peace. They call for justice. You know, treat yourself like you would treat others like you would be treated yourself. Love thy neighbour. Religion's based in justice and tolerance, actually, broadly. Yeah? And so, if we take religion in this way, then obviously this is going to be an effect on giving us a momentum towards peace and justice. But obviously everything can be, every ideology, every religion can be twisted and used in the opposite way. This is normal with human behaviour. This is not the religions necessarily, this is the humans that are the problem. But this religion, you know, has nothing to do with, this conflict, Israel-Palestinian conflict, so-called, it's more of an injustice, I would call it, has nothing to do with religion in essence, and therefore in solution it won't have anything to do with religion.
What is, according to you, the way towards peace? Many people just want to keep fighting no matter what it seems.
You know, most Palestinians in Gaza don't want to keep fighting. They want to just live a normal life. And for them, that is the way of fighting, as I said. Now, also within Gaza, there is widespread support for the resistance. And this is not least because most recently it's widely believed that the resistance military force it did level against Israel, which is totally asymmetric and, you know, is tiny in comparison to Israeli military state force, state terrorism, it did have an impact in repressing, or repelling, I would rather say, Israeli force, and actually, for example, seeing off a ground invasion and an escalation in that war. So, in a way, this force did, from many Palestinians' point of view, have a positive effect in protecting the population. So that is what I would say is the relationship with fighting. But what we need to do is take our shared moral responsibility as Western citizens. In the Netherlands, we talked about the fact that there is support for Israel steadfastly here, which we have to address. This is morally wrong. In Britain, we have the same situation, probably not to such a straight extent, but we have a historic support for Israel, for example, with the British declaration of support with the Balfour Declaration. We kind of helped start this and legitimize it. And then the American citizens, they have a steadfast responsibility because of the military aid and the number one world ally for Israel being the United States, and the extraordinary level of diplomatic cover, whitewashing immunity that the US provides for Israel. In a way, we can say that the US is most responsible amongst these Western countries. So what does this mean? This means that it's not between Israel and Palestinians necessarily to deal with. This is for us to deal with.
Thank you very much for this interview.
You're welcome. Nice to meet you.